नमस्कार, आप सभी का इस द्वितीय सत्र में हार्दिक स्वागत है। व्याख्यान माला के इस सत्र में हम अपने चेयरपर्सन से निवेदन करते हैं कि वे कृपया मंच पर आएं। इस व्याख्यान माला के मुख्य वक्ता हैं डॉक्टर पी बलराम। हम आपसे भी निवेदन करते हैं कि आप कृपया मंच पर आने की कृपा करें। आप इंट्रोड्यूस करो, मैं सीधी
I welcome Professor P. Balram. I welcome Dr. Randeep Guleria, Dr. Subrata Sinha, and Dr. Rama Chaudhry. I request Dr. Randeep Guleria to please introduce Professor P. Balram.
Good afternoon. I think we should start this session. We are right on time. It's indeed a great honor to have Professor P. Balram, Director of Indian Institute of Science, with us. His introduction is already there on the slide. You can see that he is the Chair Professor, National Center of Biological Science, Bangalore, and former Director of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He has done a lot of pioneering research, and his research interests are basically around understanding of the structure and function of voltage-gated transmembrane peptide channels, design and synthesis of model peptides, particularly disulfides, and developing fluorescent probe methodology for examining membrane structure. So it's indeed an honor to have you here with us, sir. And today you're going to be talking on reflections of science in the age of coronavirus. I think, again, a very important topic, considering that the last 2.5 to 3 years have been very challenging for us because of this novel virus. And it has really affected science in many manners, both in terms of the type of research that was being done and how it also literally shut down some areas of research because the funding all shifted towards research on COVID. So without much ado, it will be indeed a pleasure to have you give your distinguished lecture on the reflections of science in the age of coronavirus.
Okay. Can you put on the first slide? It's here.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a real privilege for me to be with you on Research Day. And it's also a special privilege for me to be introduced by Dr. Guleria. I'm very grateful for this invitation to come and speak. The only thing I must confess is I've been retired for some time. And the question that I ask myself is, what can I say to you that is really new? Then I realized that I don't have much to say to you by way of new research. So I thought the one thing that I could do really is to reflect on science in the age of the coronavirus, because over the last 2 years, our lives and our thinking and every action of ours has been dominated by the coronavirus. On this slide, I have the foundational pillars of two of the disciplines in which I have worked over my career. One is chemistry and the other is biology. So what I have really is Mendeleev and his periodic table as one of the foundational pillars of chemistry, and Darwin and his ideas on natural selection and evolution, which are particularly relevant for the coronavirus, on the other side. In the middle, I have the various images of the coronavirus which have appeared in the literature. The coronavirus has, in fact, over the last 2 years, been an artist's delight. It's been a public health nightmare, but people have imagined what the coronavirus would look like with many, many very attractive depictions of the coronavirus. One might ask, does the coronavirus belong to chemistry or does it belong to biology? And what I have on this slide is what you will find in every biology textbook, the tree of life. The tree of life, of course, has bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. There's a last universal common ancestor right at the node, which nobody knows anything about. But viruses are, of course, excluded from the tree of life when we teach students. Viruses, the question really has been, are viruses living or are they simply crystalline chemicals? It turns out viruses spring to life only once they enter a host cell. And so their ability to do biochemistry is somewhat limited as compared to even the most primitive of bacteria. A word about chemistry. One of the best definitions of chemistry that I've read was by the biochemist Arthur Kornberg, the man who discovered DNA polymerase and fired the first shot of the biotechnology revolution. Kornberg in later life called chemistry the lingua franca of the medical and biological sciences. It is, of course, one of the sad facts of medical education that chemistry often does not find a very prominent place in the education of clinicians. You might also ask, if you're going to reflect on science, what is science? Most of you have a very well-defined profession. But if you are doing scientific research, you wonder, what are you studying? Science, of course, in its broadest terms, can be defined as the study of nature. Now, if you tell somebody that science is the study of nature, the next question that they ask you is, what is nature? And the best definition that I found of nature is in volume 1, the very first issue of the journal Nature, where the biologist Thomas Huxley was asked to write the editorial. Huxley did not write the editorial. Instead, what he did was he translated from the German an essay by the German poet von Goethe, in which he said, "Nature, we are surrounded and embraced by her, powerless to separate ourselves from her and powerless to penetrate beyond her." The coronavirus, if you ask me, was in fact truly a force of nature. I want to tell you a few things about the coronavirus, but I'm going to tell you the background. Like most ordinary people, I had never heard of the coronavirus until it appeared. I don't know how many of the physicians had heard about the coronavirus. I suspect not too many of them had heard about the coronavirus until it actually was upon us. And then, of course, in the last week of March of 2020, we had the lockdown. That was our first experience with lockdowns. And for the very first time in my life, I was locked up in this little room with a computer in front of me and nothing else to do. The Prime Minister had said that you can't venture out. I remember famously said, the Lakshman Rekha is the front door of your residence, so don't get across it. And so we stayed inside. So the questions in April, May of 2020 asked by observers innocent of virology were the following. What are coronaviruses? When did science discover the coronavirus? Who first isolated this class of viruses? And then, most importantly, what did science learn from the SARS and MERS episodes of the first decade of the 21st century? The coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, is not new. It had already appeared before. We've seen the SARS-CoV-1 virus, we've seen the MERS virus, but yet we'd forgotten about them. Now, of course, I have a number of cartoons over here. The one I like best of the cartoons decorating the slide is the one at the bottom right, which of course tells you about banks. Before COVID, if you entered a bank with a mask, of course, you were thought of as a robber. And during COVID, of course, you can't enter the bank without a mask. Now, the age of the coronavirus is defined by these images. Very soon, by April of 2020, these had appeared on the internet, they'd appeared in the newspapers. Policemen in Secunderabad, auto rickshaw drivers in Chennai, chefs in Italy and in France, all of them. All this while, many people were dying in Italy. Nevertheless, they found some dark humor in decorating Easter eggs with the coronavirus. So I searched for a definition of a virus. I should know one, having studied biology, but I thought, let me still look. And the best definition of a virus that I found was in this book called Aristotle to Zoos. It's subtitled A Philosophical Dictionary of Biology. It's authored by the English immunologist Peter Medawar, one of the best writers of science. And he calls a virus a piece of bad news wrapped up in protein. And sure enough, that's what it is. The nucleic acid is wrapped up with protein. We're all familiar with the spike protein. And of course, the only difference in the coronavirus is, in addition, it's got a phospholipid bilayer, so it's an enveloped virus. If the coronavirus is an enveloped virus, this is the kind of detailed picture we have of it. You can see the lipid bilayer in blue. You can see the coronaviral spike protein projecting outwards. And then, of course, inside you have those little blue circles, which are the interior proteins of the virus, which then hold the nucleic acid in place. Now, I thought I can't come to an audience of clinicians without quoting William Osler. Many, many years ago, William Osler said that soap and water and common sense are the best disinfectants. During the pandemic, we had lots of soap, reasonable amounts of water in most places, but the one thing which was in very scarce supply was common sense. Now, why should we study the coronavirus? There are two pieces of advice, and I show both of them on this slide. The first one is from the Godfather 2 movie. Al Pacino, as Michael Corleone, says, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Very early on in the pandemic, every government had declared the coronavirus as a public enemy, and therefore we must now learn everything there is to be learned about the coronavirus. But again, since I'm in an audience of clinicians, I must quote from Abraham Flexner. It's the Flexner report of the early part of the 20th century which revolutionized American medical education. And it is that revolution in American medical education, with its enormous emphasis on research, which is what you are actually celebrating today, it is that emphasis on research which has really driven the biomedical enterprise in the West over the last century. Flexner said, the plague is upon us. One cannot well study plagues until after they've run their course. So what I really like to suggest is that our understanding of the coronavirus is just beginning. The pandemic has been officially declared to have closed, and therefore we might worry, what have we learned about the coronavirus and what is it that we will learn in the future? But my first task, which I set myself in April of 2020, was to find out who discovered the coronavirus. By that time, the BBC News and the National Geographic had put the picture of the lady here on the extreme right, June Almeida, who took the first electron micrograph of the coronavirus, which I show you here. Now, if you look at that electron micrograph, you can see where the coronavirus actually obtained its name. You can see it looks like the corona with the spikes sort of sticking out here. The people who published this paper in 1967 were David Tyrrell and June Almeida. David Tyrrell, for those of you who haven't heard his name before in the context of virology, is the man who did some of the most fundamental work on the viruses which cause the common cold. And he did all this wonderful work in the 1950s and the 1960s, immediately following the Second World War. So I went and read this paper, and then I found this paper was a wonderful paper. It had these micrographs, but I wanted to know where did the sample actually come from. And so what I did was, when you read a paper, and this is for the students who are here, sometimes the best information in papers is buried in the figure legends and in the acknowledgements, and nowadays in more modern times in the supplementary material which nobody ever reads. Here I found that this picture was of a strain called 229E, and it then thanked Dr. D. Hambre for the 229E virus. So I made a few telephone calls and asked someone, people who were in virology, have you ever heard the name Dr. D. Hambre? They told me they never heard of this name, so I thought it's time for me to go back to the literature. So if you go back to the literature 1 year earlier in the Proceedings of the Society of Experimental Biology and Medicine, this paper appears, a new virus isolated from the human respiratory tract. What Dr. Hambre, and from the journal I realized that it was a lady, from the name Dorothy. So this made me even more curious because there were relatively few ladies in American science in the early 1960s. So I needed to find out what Dr. D. Hamre looked like, and if I were going to give a talk, would I be able to put her picture on the slide just as I've put the pictures of the other people? So now my research consists of trying to find a picture of Dr. D. Hamre. But you must read this paper, because this tells you what clinical research can be. This was done at the University of Chicago, and in the university infirmary, the people who would come in mostly would be young students with colds. So all you did was to take nasal secretions from them and then try to culture a virus from these secretions, and that is how she discovered the new virus, which is the coronavirus, which is called 229E. This is the first coronavirus to be demonstrated as a human pathogen in the 1966 paper. It's also the size of the virus is determined as 89 millimicrons. Today we will say 89 nanometers. And in later years, it's actually been found to be associated with acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is what we talk about now in healthy adults. There are case reports which have appeared. She also established that the nucleic acid in these viruses was RNA by treating them with DNA synthesis inhibitors, and they didn't work, and therefore it was an RNA virus. David Tyrrell, using electron microscopy for the first time, also estimated the size. And I was really struck by this. They say 80 to 100 nanometers, and Dorothy Hamre here has said 89 nanometers. My respect for her experimental abilities then went up orders of magnitude. In 1968, this appeared. It's not a paper, it's not a letter, it's something written by the editor in response to a letter that he has received from a group of virologists, which includes D. Hamre, which said that a new class of viruses has been discovered, which are called the coronaviruses. But by the time the virologists named this formally, her name had disappeared. This made me even more curious. And so I then did what anybody should do nowadays, is to search every possible database in the literature. You can search the PubMed database, you can search the Google Scholar database, and what I found was that she was a very productive scientist, beginning in bacteriology in 1941, and had a publishing career which spanned 3 decades from 1941 to 1972, yet she remained a completely unknown scientist, and there was no photograph available. So I won't tell you what I did. At this point, I began to search, and finally I found there were some papers which had been deposited in an archives in Arizona. And now, since I had nothing to do by the end of April of 2020, I wrote a letter to the curator, an email to the curator at the Arizona archives, asking, do they have this collection? And they were very happy to receive a letter from someone. They were also locked down. And one young lady at the archives then said, as soon as the lockdown is removed, I will go and search this box. We've never looked at it. She first did, and then she found that Dorothy Hamre was an extraordinary photographer who had made lots of pictures of the American Southwest. By this time, I knew she'd also written a book called Rhinoviruses, which I found, and therefore she was, in fact, an expert. Yet nobody knew anything about her. Finally, the archivists became so interested in this because they went even during the lockdown and found that they were photographs which they had never ever looked at, had not been developed. They did it and then produced the picture. So today, if we had, I don't show you all the pictures that I got, that's the discoverer of the coronavirus. And today, if I were to give a lecture to students, I would say these are the 3 discoverers of the coronavirus. A word here. A woman who has begun with a PhD in the late 1930s, that means did her PhD during the years of the Great Economic Depression in the United States. And she worked her way through the Second World War and eventually retired from the University of Chicago as a research associate. So this will tell you how far women have come in the last 60 years. What do you do with literature research of this kind? This is historical research. All that you can do is write it up. And where will you publish it? So I published it in Frontline, which is a magazine. And so they were happy, they took it. And then, to my utter surprise, eventually I was interviewed by archivists in the United States on email, and my articles were reproduced in a newsletter in a small town in Colorado, which has a total population of 1,000. I'm very proud of this publication simply because the only reason they picked it up was Dorothy Hamre, having found the coronavirus, decided that it was time to retire and went and settled in this town and died here. So then they did put on their newsletter that the discoverer of the coronavirus lived in our town. I was also asked the question, why were you doing all of this? Reason I did this was I had nothing else to do in the lockdown. I'm not a clinician, and I got COVID in the very first phase. I could not now prescribe chloroquine or azithromycin to anybody, so I could at least find who the discoverer of the coronavirus was. So in this interview, I did tell them that's where Uray is, and this is where Flagstaff, where the archives is. And I said it is a tribute to the power of the internet that the road from Uray to Flagstaff passes through Bangalore. It also seems to me that in some strange way, the virus has led us to its discoverer by turning the world upside down. So I do hope that she will in fact appear in some future textbook of virology. But I was in correspondence at this time with a man who wrote one of the first papers on the coronavirus as a young student in the early 1970s. That is Professor Ken McIntosh at Harvard. So I asked him by email, I was corresponding with him, and then he'd written an article in Pediatric Infectious Disease about recent advances in coronavirus discovery in 2005. So when all this ended, he said, he read my article, and then I rather liked this. He said, thank you so much. And he said he was ashamed that he didn't try to find out more about Dr. Hamre, although he did know her name, because that's where the original coronavirus sample really came from. But for those of you who are interested, you must read this book called The Cold Wars. It's about the wars against the common cold, which still afflicts all of us. Now that the COVID-19 has disappeared, we are back to catching normal colds. And David Terrell did all this work, and all done with volunteers, healthy volunteers, and you put nasal secretions from sick people up the noses of healthy people and ask the question, are they going to catch cold? If they catch cold, you harvested more secretions, and then you had more raw material from which to get viruses. But Terrell is very important because he wrote a chapter in this book on medical microbiology. And I brought this along particularly because I was in correspondence with Professor Rama Chaudhry. And he said in this book, coronaviruses cause acute, mild upper respiratory infection, and in brackets, common cold. With this, the virologists lost interest in coronaviruses. Those who fund research lost interest in coronaviruses. And that's why we've really suffered during the COVID-19 pandemic. Research should have been continued. In 2003, SARS surfaced, and I have only one slide on this. That pictures Carlo Urbani, probably a physician who really deserves a place in the history of medicine because he actually identified that this was a new infectious disease, persuaded the government of Vietnam to impose the most extraordinary quarantine measures, controlled the disease at that time, but quickly contracted the disease and died a few weeks after he really identified the disease. 8,000 infections, 800 deaths. But it is this virus which has given us everything that we know about SARS-CoV-2. Much of the work on SARS-CoV-2 depends on the work that was done on SARS-CoV-1. This is a paper from the Journal of Virology which shows you the architecture. The architecture of these two viruses is very similar. The structures of the proteins involved had already been worked out. And this is why science proceeded very fast during the 2020, 2021, 2022 period. Today, many students think that this flood of papers in Nature, Science, Cell, and Lancet is because scientists have done something extraordinary. It is because they have worked on the back of the knowledge that was gained by studying SARS-CoV-1. Today, of course, the pandemic was officially declared in March of 2020. Already in 2020 in Science, the paper that appeared of the receptor binding domain of the spike protein complexed to the angiotensin converting enzyme receptor. So we have all these atomic level structures which have since appeared. As medical students, some of you might wonder, why do you need to spend so much time getting these atomic level structures? What is it that you learn from these? I can't tell you what we learned from these or what we hope to learn from these, which is a more accurate way of putting it. But I can tell you that the most important thing about atomic level structures is that they are made up of atoms. And atoms are important. Richard Feynman, the most quotable of physicists, in volume 1 of his famous lectures on physics at Caltech says, if in some cataclysm all of scientific knowledge were to be destroyed and only one sentence passed on to the next generation of creatures, what statement would contain the most information in the fewest words? He asked this question in the backdrop of the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union in the 1960s, because you're always worried about a nuclear catastrophe. Today we are once again worried about a nuclear catastrophe, and you might wonder what will happen if everything is destroyed. He says, I believe, he answers this question, it is the atomic hypothesis or the atomic fact, or whatever you wish to call it, that all things are made up of atoms, etc., etc. Remember why chemistry is important. You are a bunch of chemicals, everything is around you a bunch of chemicals, and you cannot now find a single material around you which is not a chemical. So however much the Tata Salt advertisement, which we see night after night on the cricket matches, which promises you salt, which is chemical-free, but still has 80 minerals in it, is simply nonsense. So too are the sort of advertisements that are put out, for example, by Patanjali, which will say that I'll give you a phenyl, which is now chemical-free. Everything contains chemicals. Now, a little bit towards the end of protein sequence variation by random mutation and natural selection. I'm sure Dr. Guleria is probably still getting questions on whether a new variant will now sweep through the population. So we can ask the question, what has the coronavirus done? It's been a free-running experiment. We could not have done such a wonderful experiment in a laboratory. Large populations have been infected. These populations have vastly different genetic profiles. Their immune responses are different. And the virus has evolved in this environment. I take you back in time to a paper written in 1970. This is written by the famous evolutionist John Maynard Smith. He called this paper, just a page in Nature, Natural Selection and the Concept of Protein Space. Then he talks about mutations. He takes the four-letter word, and says, let's make a single change. He gets war, another change, go. Another change, gone. Another change, gene. So if you've mutated word into gene, we've done this without changing. Every word has a meaning. And he says this is how protein sequences evolve. If mutations don't cause deleterious damage to the protein, it will survive and will find a function. And eventually mutations, either neutral mutations or functional mutations, will slowly get selected for. In biology, Darwin is everywhere. So natural selection is at the heart of the selection of coronaviral variants. This is an essay written by the Nobel Prize-winning scientist who worked on bacterial evolution in the test tube, Frances Arnold. She titled her essay, The Library of Maynard Smith, My Search for Meaning in the Protein Universe. In fact, what the coronavirus has been doing, it's been searching for meaning in response to environmental pressures. We create many environmental pressures. Vaccines are one of them. No vaccine is the same as some other vaccine. Your immune systems create a pressure, and it is in response to these pressures that variants are actually selected out. Now, the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein on which everybody concentrates has 1,273 amino acids. That is, it's a sentence of 1,273 letters. We can change each one of these the way Maynard Smith did. The number of possible sequences is 20 raised to 1273, which is astronomical. It's 10 raised to over 1600. It's a number that even the scamsters cannot imagine. It's such a large number, it's impossible. Now, it is this spike protein which actually acts as a Trojan horse, binds to the cell surface, welcomed into the cell by membrane fusion. So like the Trojan horse, it gets the enemy inside. Now, as the pandemic progressed, what can I do? I can only analyze sequences. Where do I get data? I can't get Indian data because it's a secret, and certainly not a retired professor. But of course, the National Center for Biological Information is available, and the Americans were depositing sequences, dates of sample collection, everything's given, and so there were over 6 lakh sequences. The major irony of this is that I've just come this morning after chairing a meeting of the Indian Biological Data Center where the INSACOG data has just been deposited. But it wasn't available at that time, and you can see with the help of 2 of my colleagues, one of whom's retired and the other one's a postdoc, we spent our time on computers, email, and the telephone discussing this and putting together data. Now, of course, these figures can be understood. I try to simplify them. I'm a protein chemist, and therefore I like to look in terms of single amino acid replacements. I don't like to look in terms of pangolin lineages, which are a set of abbreviations which I can't understand. So it's the pandemic was driven by a single mutation, D614G, an aspartic acid changing to glutamic acid at one position. The Wuhan virus mutated, adapted to human hosts, and afterwards the pandemic went. Along the x-axis here, days since January 1st of 2020. So just days. So if you look here, you will be coming here to 2021 at the end. Now, of course, if you look at the American data for variants, the American data is beautiful because the Americans had a free-flowing experiments. They were free with their data. They allowed everybody to mix, so people got all kinds of variants. And so you can see over time the rise of the alpha variant and its fall, the rise of the delta variant and its fall. And for someone trained in chemistry, they look almost like perfect titration curves. They look like you can actually find a crossover point. At this point, for example, you might ask the question, is there evidence for viral recombination in people who have been infected with both strains? But here I show you something which is important toward the end of my talk, a mutation at position 681. This is very close to what is called the furin cleavage site, and it's a proline going to histidine or a proline going to arginine. In the alpha variant, it was this. In the delta variant, it was the R. And now again in the Omicron variant, we are back to the H again. So one can study infection dynamics with this data over time. Most of you probably are familiar with this, so I will not actually belabor this point, but to just tell you that as time goes on, you can see this. You can see variants coming and going, and this, of course, is the dramatic rise of the Omicron mutant at this point. And you can see, now if you superpose this on infections and deaths and hospitalizations and so on, you will find that is much less when you come to the Omicron. So by this time, you've got mutations which are not doing too much damage to the host. I'll cross over this, but to tell you, this analysis of mutations sometimes is helpful in looking at antibody responses and in trying to see which antibody binds at which position. Has the virus evolved a mutation which will help it to evade the antibody response? But since I was going to reflect on science, and this is largely for the students who are getting into research now, science has transformed in a way over the last 50 years that is completely unimaginable. The Omicron mutant was discovered in South Africa in November 23rd of 2021. It was not published, it was tweeted. And the mutations were tweeted, and 2 days later, because I was following this, a correction was also tweeted on Twitter. So if you found the arginine, and it was originally listed as a lysine, you have to correct it to an arginine. You have to be following Twitter. But I want you to worry about 2 things. One is the date, November 23rd, November 25th. There are 30-point mutations. 2 deletions and 3 insertions. Till Omicron came, there were no insertions. Now the question, of course, is where did the insertion come from? And sure enough, by December, within a few weeks, there are already bioinformatics people now suggesting that this unique insertion has actually come from recombination with coronavirus 229E, Dorothy Hamre's original discovery. Now this means that there have been co-infections with the old coronavirus, the new coronavirus, and new variants have sprung up. There are others, of course, in the literature, because all this analysis is ongoing, which says that maybe it jumped from humans to mice, had these mutations, jumped back, and so on. But one doesn't really know. But the dates are important. November 23rd of 2021, on 27th of December 2021, a paper appears in Science, which is now a structure of the Omicron spike trimer, complex to the angiotensin converting receptor soluble domain, and an anti-Omicron antibody. So you can see that the pace at which science is being done in the West is unimaginable compared to the pace at which we can actually do anything. And this is actually a very worrying kind of trend. Before I conclude, I only want to draw your attention to one last fact. Where did the coronavirus come from? Did it come from bats to human beings through an intermediate animal host? Was it classical zoonotic transfer? Or was it a virus which was being investigated in a laboratory, which had now escaped from the laboratory environment and eventually adapted to a human host? This is now from a paper appearing in 2022, 19th of May, and I draw your attention to the name of Jeff Sachs. He's an economist. Lancet originally appointed him as the chairman of what they call the COVID force or whatever it is. He resigned and so on. But he's now pointed out something which had been pointed out much earlier, that the furin cleavage site, which is necessary for coronaviral membrane fusion with the host cell, is completely unique to SARS-CoV-2. None of the bat viruses so far have that. And it turns out that the mutations which are there, the furin cleavage site, I've listed it here. This is the mutation which drove the Delta and the Alpha and the Omicron sequences. And you can see this complete cluster of highly basic residues, arginine, is now known from experiment, enhances protease cleavage, which is necessary for membrane fusion. So where did this come from? We do not know, but the paper by Sachs now points out that this sequence corresponds to the subunits of an epithelial sodium channel. And people have been doing experiments where they've been trying to engineer viruses for what you call humanizing the coronavirus. And this has been done in American laboratories, and it has been done in Chinese laboratories. We don't know where the coronaviruses came from. I don't think we will ever know, because geopolitics and other factors will ensure that we never know. Now, it could have come from natural evolution or laboratory creation. And when I think about this, I'm reminded of a poem that I read when I was in school, where William Blake wondered about the lamb and the tiger. He noted that both the lamb and the tiger, and indeed all animals, have bilateral symmetry. The lamb looks beautiful, this tiger also looks beautiful, but the tiger also looks fearsome. And he says, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? So he is a religious person, so he simply asks this question, was they created by divine intervention? We might ask the same question about the coronavirus, because it also has the fearful symmetry that Blake imagined. Now, I worried about all of this when I was locked up in the lockdowns, and so I think I did all my research sitting at a desk. And John le Carre, who writes some of the best spy novels I've ever read, said survival is an infinite capacity for suspicion. And he also said a desk is a dangerous place from which to watch the world. A few months ago, I was asked to give a talk to a group of engineering students. And you know now that the only thing that is more difficult than talking to medical students is to talk to engineering students. And there was a listener, and she wrote me an email after this because she was on the management board of the institution which was conducting this online lecture. And she sent me a mail. She said she introduced herself as a poet. And she said that, I never knew all of this was there in science, but she said maybe there is poetry in chemistry or something like this. She sent me a mail a week later, and she said, go and read this blog. It's on oncology. And she drew my attention to something written by someone she knew, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, because I thought this is Research Day, and I should really show you something. This is by an oncologist at Columbia University, Azra Reza. She is the oncologist of Pakistani American origin, and she's written a book called The First Cell, and she's been a practicing oncologist for a long period of time. And then she says, despite all the research that has been done over the last 50 years or so, how she obsesses over what I've done wrong and what the field is doing wrong collectively. And she's written this book called The First Cell, which really asks this question, which really is the first cell which triggers a cancer? And this, of course, is akin to asking the question, which is the first cell which has led to life on Earth, for instance? We don't know. And so there are many questions which have evolutionary implications, which I think come out when you read something like this. Lastly, I must quote Lederberg, writing in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1988, in the aftermath of the AIDS pandemic. And he wrote this article called, an editorial called Medical Science, Infectious Disease and the Unity of Humankind. And you must read him. He says, human intelligence, culture, and technology have left all other plant and animal species out of the competition. We also may legislate human behavior, but we have too many illusions that we can, by writ, govern the remaining vital kingdoms. The microbes that remain are competitors of last resort for dominion of the planet. The bacteria and viruses know nothing of national sovereignties. In that natural evolutionary competition, there is no guarantee that we will find ourselves the survivor. And this was Lederberg in 1988, and so that's not too long ago. He's not a man whom you can quite ignore, and therefore I think you must think about it a little bit. The one thing that the coronavirus has taught us is that two of the most important preoccupations in Indian life, one is religion and the other is politics, that both religion and politics retreated before a force of nature. Lastly, I must quote from an Indian, the first Director General of the Indian Council of Medical Research, very distinguished. I never had the opportunity to meet him, but I've always been told by very senior people that you must read things which he wrote, Dr. Pandit. And what Dr. Pandit, in a convocation address at King George's Medical College in Lucknow in 1956 said, are our medical students being educated in the true liberal tradition of a university? Are they exposed to the intellectual ferment and humanizing influence of a university education? Are we sending forth through the portals of our universities men and women whom we call physicians in the time-honored meaning of the word? Physicians who, in addition to recognizing accurately and treating effectively human ailments, also possess the imagination, resourcefulness, and ideas to deal with unexpected situations. COVID-19 presented us with an entirely unexpected situation. He asks a question, do our physicians have an intelligent understanding of man in relation to his environment? If I were asked today to paraphrase Dr. Pandit, I would only say, do our scientists have an intelligent understanding of man in relationship to his environment? Thank you very much for having me here, and the only acknowledgement that I wish to make is to the two institutions which have nurtured me throughout the course of my professional career, the Indian Institute of Science on the top left, and the institutions which has provided me some shelter in retirement, the National Center for Biological Sciences. Thank you.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद महोदय आपके ज्ञानवर्धक और प्रेरणादायक उद्बोधन के लिए। मैं डॉक्टर रणदीप गुलेरिया से निवेदन करूंगा कि वे हमारे आज के मुख्य वक्ता महोदय का अभिनंदन करने की कृपा करें। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
I now request Dr. Deepika to please felicitate Dr. Randeep Guleria.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। अब हम आगे के सत्र में बढ़ते हैं पैनल डिस्कशन के लिए, और मैं डॉक्टर कमल से निवेदन करूंगा कि वे आएं और इसके विषय में हमें बताएं।
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon. We now proceed to the panel discussion. I request Professor Rakesh Aggarwal sir, Director JIPMER Puducherry, to please come on to the dais to moderate the session. We wish to convey our sincere gratitude to Professor Rakesh Aggarwal sir for kindly agreeing to moderate this panel discussion at a very short notice. We requested him only 2 days ago, and he was very kind to spare time from his extremely busy schedule to travel to Delhi for this panel discussion. Thank you, sir. I also kindly invite onto the stage Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, Secretary, Department of Biotechnology. Our Honorable Director, Dr. M. Srinivas sir. Changing this. Okay. Yeah. So I request Dr. Rajesh Gokhale sir, Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, to kindly come onto the stage. Our Honorable Director, Dr. M. Srinivas sir. Dr. Chitra Sarkar, former Dean Research and former Head, Department of Pathology, AIIMS. Dr. Balram Bhargava sir, Chief Cardiothoracic Center, AIIMS and former Director General, ICMR. Dr. Shirshendu Mukherjee, Director, BIRAC. Dr. Shinjini Bhatnagar, Professor of Eminence, THSTI. Unfortunately, due to some unavoidable circumstances, Dr. Rajiv Bahl will not be able to join us today for the panel discussion.
Sorry for this. I think we'll settle down in a minute. Good afternoon. It's going to be very difficult for us to match the lecture that we have just gone through, and for me to match the person who was actually supposed to conduct this. It's very difficult to step into the shoes of Professor Vijay Raghavan, who was supposed to conduct this. But let me try my best. You already heard about the panelists. We have a virtual who's who, people who have done research, people who have done innovations, people who are responsible for promoting innovation, and what have you. So we have Dr. Gokhale, who's Secretary Department of Biotechnology. We have Dr. M. Srinivas, Director of this institute. Professor Balram Bhargava, Chief of Cardiothoracic Center at All India Institute, and he was previously the DG of ICMR and Secretary Department of Health Research. We have Professor Chitra Sarkar, a Professor of Pathology, previously Dean Research at All India Institute. Dr. Shirshendu Mukherjee, who is a microbiologist for training but has done a lot of innovation and has worked for promotion of innovation and is currently the Director of Biotechnology Innovation Research Assistance Council, or BIRAC. And we have Professor Shinjini Bhatnagar, a Professor of Eminence, a pediatrician, a pediatrics researcher who's been in this institute for several years and is now at Transnational Health Science Institute. So she's also into translation from medical research to products. So for the audience, we have 60 minutes, and I do intend coming to you and giving you an opportunity to ask questions and give your opinions. So we'll in between try and do that. I'll try and keep it simple, something that we people in medicine can understand, and I'm not going to go into too much of technology terms. That's actually because partly I don't understand many of those terms. So this panel discussion is supposed to be on biomedical innovation and entrepreneurship, how to take it forward. So to my panelists, and maybe Dr. Mukherjee can tell us this. So we are discussing about these phrases called innovation, entrepreneurship. These words are somewhat foreign to, I'm sure, many of us in the audience, and possibly to some people on the stage also, who knows. Can Dr. Mukherjee, you define these words for us? Innovation, entrepreneurship. And I might tell you, we all in this room seem to understand research, and that's what this day is about. So how are these words different from research? And then maybe we'll be able to relate to it.
Thank you, sir, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And
Can we do something about the mic, please? Yeah.
yeah. Thank you, sir, and it's always a pleasure to listen to Professor Balaram, and great lecture and very educative, and a lot of new things came to us we never knew. Sir, your question to me is, what is innovation and entrepreneurship? So I would like to quote from Albert Einstein's one quote from him, and I'll read it out to all of you. Imagination is more important than knowledge. To raise new questions, new possibilities, to regard old problems from new angle requires creative imagination and marks real advances in science. I think this quote from Albert Einstein talks about research leading to new things. So innovation can't happen without research. Innovation follows research, and innovation is something which comes out in a novel way, which has to have a basis of research. It has to be novel. It has to have something which really creates an impact. It creates sort of a tangible benefit to the society. So that is per se innovation per se, and innovation can't happen without research. Research is fundamental to innovation, which is something new. Now, the second part of your question was, what is entrepreneurship? Now, converting innovation into a business model or something which can be exploited to societal benefit is converting science into entrepreneurship is converting science innovation into a business model is entrepreneurship. So, but it is not so easy per se. Research leads to innovation, innovation leads to entrepreneurship. There is a long way. I tried to define it very simply, but there is a long channel. We start research with proof of concept development, then that proof of concepts needs to be validated. Once that is validated, that is called innovation. Then that needs to be translated, and that translation we have to cross what we call a valley of death, which is a very challenging part of the innovation cycle. Once we cross the valley of death and the innovation is validated, then we can think of entrepreneurship. Converting that innovation into a business model is entrepreneurship.
Thank you. But I thought innovation was everywhere. We in India, why we in India? Everybody in the world today talks about jugaad. I thought that was innovation without research. Would you disagree that that's innovation also? There is no research basis to it. So I'm trying to go away from how you define. There are so many instruments being made by jugaad. So in biomedicine, it may be different, but isn't that innovation?
Absolutely, that is innovation. That we call it incremental innovation. So incremental innovation, or you call jugaad innovation, that is also needs science driven. You can't do an incremental innovation without understanding of what innovation has already been done. So that is very important, and that needs to be built into the system. So jugaad is a word which we use it, but that needs to have a full scientific understanding of the process.
I agree with you. Anyway, in biomedicine, I don't think we can have jugaad. We have to have research. So I'll agree with you. So Dr. Balram Bhargava, so you've seen it all in the last few years, what is happening in the country all around. So what do you think is the current status of innovation and entrepreneurship in medical institutions? And as a country, how are we doing on innovations and entrepreneurship in biomedicine?
I think, first of all, congratulations to Dr. Balram for an excellent lecture. And on the basis of that lecture and the COVID pandemic that we have witnessed, we saw how Dr. Balram took us all around the world. But ultimately, he landed at ICMR. He landed in India. So ultimately, he landed at ICMR. So he took us from USA to Cambridge.
But he ended at ICMR of 1950s. Please understand that.
Let me finish. Let me finish. So he took us from Chicago to Washington to Route 66, from Flagstaff to Colorado to Cambridge to Salisbury. But ultimately, he landed in the presence of this whole 100, 200 meters that we are. So innovation in India is happening here. So that is what is to be remembered, whether it's All India Institute or the Indian Council of
Is that true?
Medical Research.
I think we'll be doing a wrong thing by saying so.
No.
No. Only recently we had
let me finish the
Professor Mahalanobis passing away.
Exactly.
And I think he did innovation more than in this 100-meter circle.
So
please understand that.
I'm coming to that. Dr. Mahalanobis and his oral rehydration therapy, which Dr. Bhan took forward further, and then again it was taken to the clinics through. So all those things, innovation is happening in India, and it has been happening in India. But the major problem that we have is that India works against India. We don't glorify our own innovation. Whatever innovation we are doing, we do not glorify it. The 50 slides that we saw, only one slide was dedicated to India. So I think it deserved more than one slide, and there could have been much more slides about India. And a lot of work has happened in India in innovation. So you're coming back to your question, where is India in innovation? I think the direction is right. We are in the right direction. Coming back to the point of jugaad. Jugaad is a quick fix innovation which was there, but it has to be robust. It has to be cheap. So we as Indians are genetically endowed for jugaad innovations. we as Indians are gifted to be cost effective, frugal, low, thinking of working in lesser resources, and we should not lose this gene by mutation or becoming expensive westernized.
Okay, let me go back to Shirshendu. Shirshendu, you also have some international perspective of innovation. How have we done as compared to other countries? So I'm trying to extend from the question that we had. And why do you think today more than ever we need to focus in India on innovation and entrepreneurship?
So in the last 10 years, we have done exceptionally well in the innovation ecosystem. And thanks to organizations like DBT, ICMR, other funding agencies, BIRAC, and things like that, which really catalyzed and enabled the innovation ecosystem in this country. And if you see, there is a model called 360-degree innovation model, which we talk about, is 60% is science, but 40% of the innovation cycle is apart from science, which we call it, the IP issues, the regulatory issues, the clinical development plan, and of course the funding. Funding has improved exceptionally well in last 10 years. We have, if you see the BIRAC model itself, we have created incubation ecosystem across the country where you don't have to bother about instruments availability and things like that. We have funding, we have mentorships have developed, and thanks to organizations like AIIMS, which have ignited clinical researchers into innovation ecosystem, the Stanford India Biodesign or Biodesign system which has been created, that has been really pushing innovation ecosystem in this country, and that we are matching into the global standards now. And we have, working but innovation needs to have teams. It is not a one thing. You need to have science talking to all the other aspects of the place. Science needs to talk, basic science needs to talk to clinicians, the regulators, the IP, the funders, the business plan development, and the exit strategy. Needs to be built together. That we call 360-degree innovation cycle. That, if it's successful, it can convert to an entrepreneurship model, and that can literally fly off. So we have done literally well. We have not reached that peak, but we are literally touching that. We are going very fast there.
Let me move to you, Dr. Gokhale. You've been associated with a lot of biomedical research labs, the CSIR labs, the DBT labs. In the public sector have done very well in terms of science. In the last few years, they are publishing in Science, Nature, Cell, what have you. And they've also done well, better than the medical institution in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship. What Dr. Balram was referring to in COVID, most of that happened in those biology labs rather than in medical institutions. What do you think? I know you have very little experience of medical institutions, but what do you think is the difference in that ecosystem versus the medical institutions? Because if we understand that, we could make a difference. Thank you.
So let me try and reframe this little bit actually for me to understand. So innovation, as you rightly said, is there in all phases and all facets actually. It's there in our day-to-day lives, what we do actually. So we can't take away that because that becomes a jugaad innovation actually. However, what is important from an entrepreneurship, what innovation is how to drive revenue for a model for a company actually. I mean, the focus of the discussion should be very clear actually. If you're talking about entrepreneurship, it's about how to be able to make revenue from what you have, from whatever science or whatever technology or whatever kind of business model that you come up with, how can you create a revenue? And I can give you a simple example. If you look at just yesterday, I was reading in newspaper actually, the Meta India, which is a Facebook of thing, Facebook, which is nothing but Facebook actually in India, the Meta India, has made about 16,000 crores from his ad model in 1 year. You just imagine this, this is what not even the investment in our science and technology ministry actually, total of put together actually. Whereas the innovation model in Facebook is rather amazing. Right, it does not really require research, it really required a sense of understanding of how systems and business models and propositions of value creation will be managed in a systemic way, such that it creates excitement and creates a panel, societies are doing it. So it's an innovation of a different kind actually. My point is that we've never understood correctly when we want to say something. When we want to say entrepreneurship, then we start talking about doing research. Then we start about, and entrepreneurship is not about doing research. It's about having done the research, do you have a mechanism to productize it such that it can create value? And that's almost absent in biomedical institutions or medical institutions as of today, primarily because that's not the way it is looked at, actually. There's a different way of looking at it. Luckily, what happens, CSIR, which has an I in it, which is for industry, they had a better connect for the industry, and they therefore started thinking about it and initiated a program about that around. And because they had a connect, they set up some of these activities, which has kind of led to all other scientific institutions to take up. So it's very, very important to understand when you talk about entrepreneurship, it's about making interesting business propositions and which is of value. And that's how I look. And if we do that, I think medical institutions will also start covering. In fact, the capacity is so large today to be able to look at from different point of view. I mean, I gave an example of data right now, right?
Yeah,
The data in
that's what I was about
scientific
to say.
medical
That
institutions.
way in India, we have Flipkart, we have Ola, we have so many. So those are very different fields. We are talking about medicine and biomedicine and science.
No, I use meta because it's not a consumer market proposition. It's actually just a
It's social science.
side.
So those things work in India. The question right now is, how do we take our science? See, we have taken our science ahead. So we do launch satellites for others. So we have tried to commercialize. But again, we haven't been able to be as what has happened, say, with France doing it or other countries doing it. So there is, even though we have the Gujaratis and we've always been traders, businessmen, that's what we have said. But somehow that hasn't happened with our science. So is it just that we haven't started doing it, or is there something more than that?
No, I wouldn't consider the social platforms are not science, actually, right? I mean, it's a science that has involved tremendous amount of IT management and technological interventions. So it is scientific, but it is actually understanding what the business models would be such that you can make value proposition. And that's what I'm saying. In a biomedical environment, we need to convert ourselves into that. I mean, for example, the data that actually collect from patients, that itself is such a valuable repository, actually, if you structure it in a form and use it.
We'll come to that.
So
That's
it's
an
a
interesting
thought process and idea that I'm putting to it.
Okay. So, Shinjini, so we are saying from science, from having a finding, a discovery, we need a jump into making it a product. So how does one translate this finding, this thought of a product into a product? Should one straightway go to industry? Does it, because, what do you think we need to do next?
So I'm going to talk more basic, being a researcher myself. And I think the kind of things we were able to innovate was sitting here at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And Balram already talked about the ORS innovation that happened here under Dr. Mahan's mentorship. But so the main thing is that I'll take the lead question later. I'm just talking about, you have a product. You need to validate it. The validation should happen in a very unbiased manner. It should not be the inventor validating what he or she has done, number one. Number two, you do need to get the industry on board very quickly, because as a scientific researcher, you've got the idea, you've done all the clinical research, and you've done it with rigor, you've done it with all the methodology that you should do. But finally, if you want to see it going in to the market, to the people who it's meant for, you need to get the industry on board very quickly. And I'm going to give two examples which happened here. One was, of course, the ORS, and I'm not heard. Okay. Yeah. That's right. Okay. So when we had the ORS story sorted, it took us some time to convince the industry to actually change the formulation which was already there. And so we had to bring the industry as well as the government on board and then be able to change it. And that happened by academic researchers in All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So it's not that you need innovation sitting somewhere outside. The second thing was for a diagnostic test for celiac disease. Again, that was a partnership with the scientists, and then an industry on board very quickly. The prototype was prepared, was validated again by a group of people who we were not involved with, and taken to the market. So I think that's very important, that even just answering simple questions, you need to get the validation done quickly and get the industry on board quickly. I mean, larger questions we can look at.
We'll come to later. So Dr. Srinivas, as a head of a major medical institution, what do you think are the major challenges that institutions such as this and its faculty face in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship? Do you think there are legal challenges? Do you think there are financial challenges or something else?
I guess the challenges are there, but of course we need to address those things, the legal, financial, and all that is being talked about. Basically, what I think is basically what is required at the moment is probably, we work in silos. That is the big challenge, I guess. If you ask me, I'll just tell you that, when we were in Ireland, I was a senior research fellow at one of the children's hospital. We were looking at one of those, bio implant for this thing. We had to connect with everybody, industry were coming to the hospital rather than we struggle here to go to the people. There was a association between our hospital and a veterinary hospital where everything was there. The people were, ready for us to go and do the experiments on the animals. And then the research cell used to take care of all the IPR issues, speaking to the industry and everything. See, as a doctor, we don't run around the people, I think that is which is probably lacking with us. If I do something like that in India, I think I'll be struggling a lot. I'll be going from place to place, people to people, and then spending time, as a surgeon or some people who are on the clinical side, it becomes very painful for us to run around for all this, If it is a basic scientist, is okay, to the certain extent that they can think of doing it because it's a part of their training program. They have that energy and the, enthusiasm to go around about it. But as a clinician, it becomes difficult for us to run around for all these people and do it, But that's possible in India also, if you look into that, COVID opened up our eyes, a lot of collaborations and cutting these borders happened because of COVID. We did not have the BSL-3 lab in our medical college at ESIC Medical College Hospital. Within 15 days, through the help of the Ministry of Defense.
We are talking about innovation and entrepreneurship. So let's look at innovations that have happened during COVID in medical institutions such as this. Let's forget about National Institute of Virology. Let's forget about those institutions.
Now, I'm just coming to the collaboration. What is important for us is that if we are a clinician or something like that, we need to be hand-holding from the institutions. CSIR is there, ICMR is there, DST, DBT, all these people, cutting across those borders and going beyond the so-called medicine and the basic sciences. We had a collaboration with the Ministry of Defense. We never entered those institutions. We were not permitted to enter those institutions, but we were asked to go and look into them. And the lockdown was a very blessing in disguise because they were also without work those days. So we could get a BSL-3 done in 15 days. And the same way with the Electronic Corporation of India Limited, they were also without any work because they said that, it's a lockdown period, but the scientists were willing to work. Because they were, if you ask a scientist to sit at home, I think it's the most painful thing. Unless what Dr. Bhargava sir was saying that, I think of literature, poetry, art and other things and then compile and then come to a beautiful oration which you give it here today. It is very difficult for them. I think we need to cut across these borders and go beyond the medicine, science, biochemistry and all that. And then being in a government institution like this, I think we need a lot of collaboration between the institutions, especially the defense ministry institutions, which we had in Hyderabad, enormous amount of things. Artificial intelligence, we got the support. The Department of Atomic Energy through the ECL gave it for the electronic health records and electronic physiological monitors recording. Whole lot of things that IIT Delhi helped, IIT Hyderabad helped for us, University of Hyderabad helped for us. So a lot of things happen through this kind of thing. I think we need to collaborate both those things and the institutions like ICMR, DST, DBT and everybody and beyond those ministry, they should come out and make that atmosphere congenial for the people to collaborate and go about it. COVID was an exception because everybody was helping to us. A non-COVID area, I don't think we are most welcome to those institutions to go about it. I think we have a challenges. I think we need to go. Maybe the legal issues are also there. Those things also we need it. At the end of the day, I think we need a university sort of campus where we have legal support. There's a technology support. So basically bridging the gap. AIIMS will combine with IIT and then maybe an ISB and all that, IIMS and all that. That I think we should be doing it.
You've been sitting patiently. I'm sorry for that. But what do people in the audience think? Anyone wishes to say, what do you think are the barriers? Sir, we'll start with younger people. There is a young man there. We'll come to the seniors later. Yes. See, he can't even believe it that he could be asked to come and speak. You raised your hand, right? Yeah, so come. That's part of the problem in our medical institutions. Go ahead, dear. Shout. At your age, you can speak and we can hear.
So, I'm Viswas Kumar Anand and I'm intern here. What I feel is that like we get to ideas, we get our research works done, we get the data, but the IPR, the intellectual property rights, which we are neither trained nor we know much about that, and that's the first step from where we move towards converting our ideas into product or company or whatever entrepreneur or like going to the society. So that's the point I'm.
So the Dean, Dr. Subrata Sinha, please have a course on IPR for your interns. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, dear. You made your point. Yeah. Dr. Mukherjee.
Just 2 points. One, that mindset, that we as a researcher publish a paper, get impact factor, that's end of it. Go forward. Second, infrastructure, that innovation gets a deal further. There's infrastructure support to go further. It means more collaboration, more legal framework, the IPR issues, and then a support system. So my idea taken forward by industry or by other co-collaborators. That's why.
Is there any lady who wants to say anything? Otherwise, I'll go to Professor Mohapatra. Yes, ma'am. Please come. No, ma'am, the younger person behind you. Yeah, you first and then madam also. No problem. We have time. Please come. You people are tomorrow's India, not we.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving the opportunity. Now that we're talking about
This
IPR,
is one thing I think we need to get out of. Please, next person, don't spend time saying this. You got your opportunity because you raised your hand.
since we're talking about IPR, I've worked in the ICMR for long and I could not understand when I'm innovating something, is that my intellectual property or is it ICMR's DG's intellectual property?
Thank you. Ma'am, please come. We don't have the current DG ICMR here. We'll come to you, so you better think about the answer. No, I'm sure he knows the answer. That's not a problem. Okay.
I will take from the silos part. The question the intern asked, we have a patent incubator cell here. Dr. Vel Pandian is doing it. The only thing is that we need to have internship electives in things like IPR.
Open that and don't keep that cell as a silo.
Entrepreneurship, medical humanities. When they are interns, we can give them that choice of electives that can raise the level.
Thank you. Professor Mohapatra, please. Sorry, sir, to keep you waiting, but then that's the respect we have for elders.
I think Dr. Bahl had a meeting about 15 years back in Ashoka Hotel, and he was talking about industry and academia involved medical science. What you do when you did research in COVID, we took quickly the Indian biotech, the COVID vaccine development. So here the science and the product are going hand in hand. How quickly a medicine takes 10 to 15 years, but in 6 months time our COVID vaccine are ready, because here the industry, scientists and researcher all came together. So there is no coordination. This was Dr. Bhan when he was in DBT. He had a meeting in Ashoka Hotel and 100 industry came. They say the academia think industries are bad and industries are academics are in the White House. They cannot come out from Crystal Palace. This is the problem in India.
So we don't have silos, we have palaces, and each one of us lives in our own palace. So let me go before you, Dr. Bhargava, to Dr. Sarkar. She hasn't spoken. So Dr. Sarkar, she asked in the context of ICMR. But let's say this had been one of your faculty members who had got up and said, when I do something, I don't know IPR belongs to her or to the All India Institute. What happens in All India Institute?
We also have intellectual property rights has been sanctioned in the institute, and the intellectual property rights, if I can say, if it originates from the institute, we have it. We have a document on it, which is vetoed by the Ministry of Law, and all the rules and regulations regarding how to whom the IP will belong, and how the royalty will be distributed, etc., in collaborations, in research projects from AIIMS are all worked out in that document. But I have a few issues which I would like to raise, which is in context with the young person who talked about IP. What is very important in any medical institute, and that's ecosystem is lacking, is I have to file a patent. The patent belongs to AIIMS. I want to file the patent. Now, patent filing itself is a long procedure and a financial implication, whether first I do a national and then go on to the PCT filing, which is an international filing, which may go on to anywhere about 2.5 lakhs. Do we have a policy at the moment in medical institutions, unlike in engineering institutions, where a faculty with an innovation which belongs to AIIMS will be supported for patent filing? If you have it with an organization under a research project like DBT, then or with IIT, then they help you to file the patent. But if it's entirely a patent which belongs to, you are the innovator, it has originated from the funds of AIIMS, we do not immediately have a policy that there is financial help for the patent filing, which not only takes a huge amount, but also may need support over years as an annual fees. The second point is, I may be an innovator, I go with IIT and a company is opened, suppose I'm able to commercialize it. So who will commercialize? AIIMS is not one who sells. So do I need somebody to commercialize my IP when it reaches that stage? We have no such policies in place about commercialization. Third, can a doctor be a part of a company? Can I hold an equity in a company? I don't have such rules and regulations where because of conflict of interest, I can do it. And last but not the least, a very important thing for innovation for our clinicians, many of them are interested. Do we have any protected time to do the innovation? It is a huge lot of time that one takes. So a suggestion which was put forth at one point of time is engineering institutions encourage the innovation and entrepreneurship, and they build an ecosystem like IIT. We have an MOU with IIT. The IIT has the FITS, and the FITS does all the IP management, the industry management. We have started a bioincubator here. It is just about a year old. But to put in medical institutions, this IP management, the industry management in place, will possibly need collaboration with third parties, and that like BCIL, Kalam Institute, the NHSRC, and all these may be helpful to medical institutes where people do not have the time or still the ecosystem has not come in. But it's very important that with this Atmanirbhar Bharat and with our younger faculty going towards innovation and entrepreneurship, that we build this ecosystem of IP management and industry management within medical institutions so that our faculty get the benefit of the innovation and just not get a small royalty being a mentor or an innovator. So that is a very important thing.
Thank you. And let me add a little bit of my view here. So I come from a similar institution, which is smaller, of course, but the institution funds the initial process of filing patent, whether it comes out of the institute funds, and sometimes people are coming up with something where actually no funding has been involved. But yes, there are challenges, because I think somebody needs to evaluate what to file patent for, because what is also happening is people come up with ideas which do not appear to be commercially viable, or they are so small, it seems to be that I filed 2 patents, and that seems to be the idea, which is not really useful, as was said by Dr. Shirshendu Mukherjee in the beginning. Ultimately, the whole purpose of patent is either to encash it or to make it available, license it to somebody so that it will be available to public for free, which is how for institutions such as us it should be. And I agree with you that, and then the faculty member wants it to be protected forever. If it has not been, commercialized in 4 years, why should I, head of the institution, go on doing so? So I think there are challenges on both sides. We'll go to Dr. Bhargava, and just keep your answer short to that lady's answer question.
I just want to say one point in relevance to this. See, idea does not mean an innovation. Ideas everyone has. Every night I sleep, I have 100 ideas. I jot them down many times, but they're just ideas. Unless you're able to translate it through the whole process by getting a prototype, getting a product, getting a animal studies, getting a clinical study, getting a validation, patent and all that. The challenges which you talked about, patent filing, Office of Technology Licensing, those are minuscule in today's environment. There is so much funding available from all agencies, and there is policies are also there in place from the ICMR also, where all medical colleges can work like IITs. That policy has been launched by the minister, so that is not a problem. Important thing is the philosophical part, that once your patent is then, it is sold, how much will I get? That is the important question for everyone. Here, there are 2 philosophical questions. Again, I want to bring it. There is called one side of the spectrum is Edisonian innovation, and the other side of the spectrum is Gandhian innovation. Edisonian innovation is said that anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. So he just wants to make money. Whether it is useful to society or not useful to society, I want to make money. And the Gandhian innovation says that there is a thin line between need and greed. So you have to balance it out. For a country like India, it has to be a balance between a Gandhian and an Edisonian innovation, and somewhere middle path where, so how much will one get, the profit? Now, where an ecosystem where innovation is just starting, they give 80%, 90% to the inventor. An ecosystem where innovation has matured, they give 10%, 20% to the innovator. Stanford is a classic example. 80% is taken by, 90% is taken by Stanford University, where innovation has matured. While IIT is the other end of the spectrum, 70% is given to the inventor because innovation ecosystem is developing. So this is a broad spectrum where anywhere institutions can fit in.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Exactly
Go ahead.
as we stand, AIIMS has, on some of these issues, a very clear policy. When I do something, my group, my students, whosoever is, we are inventors. The assignee of it is a patent held by AIIMS, but we are classified as inventors. AIIMS gives the inventors, I think, 60% of any royalty share that you get, which you can internally divide up depending on your contributions or equally. I mean, this is something which is standard. This is there it is written. It's been used before. And so on this issue, there is not, I mean, if you are able to sort of commercialize a patent for a royalty, this will be the distribution. Okay. The second thing is, through NRDC, Indian patents are filed free, provided they go through that process of vetting. Some amount of vetting, I am sure, is required. You cannot just pop up and say, you do this. So there is some minimal vetting which goes on. As far as PCT and foreign filings are concerned, as of now, we are a bit scared for the same reasons, that they are very expensive to do and maintain. And very often, then it becomes a commercial issue, whether your investment is worth it or not. And for that, as Dr. Bhargava said, there must be many agencies which would help you in that process. So just wanted to put these facts on.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll come to you, Dr. Deepak. Of the people on the dais, how many of you have experience of setting up a company or a startup? Good. Well, that's good. People in the front row, any one of you? People in the audience, anyone? Is there, so how was your experience? You want to tell us? Easy, difficult? Because we are all talking about, and I also want somebody who tried but could not do it. Is there anybody who tried and could not do it? I know it's very difficult to raise your hand. There you are. You are the intern who talked, right? No, the other person. So why don't you tell us what your experience was? Both of you? Ma'am, younger people first. They are the startup generation. I agree. Madam, we'll get the mic to you. Don't worry. Please, so you first him, then you, and after that, madam. Madam, we'll get you the mic. Can we get a mic? Please go ahead. Start here.
Yeah, so I was a MBBS student in JIPMER, Rakesh is a student, and we were involved with a lot of innovation with IITs as well as MVITs there. At that point of time, it was quite difficult, is what I felt, collaborating with other institutes, being a part of JIPMER. But when I passed out, I started my own startup, a digital health startup, collaborating with private colleges. What I realized is that it's quite easier when you are outside a government college to collaborate with institutes, number one. And when I came to AIIMS, I had to give up all my equity because we signed an NPA when we joined junior residency. And so I left it. One thing I want to request is that how do you guys think that you can encourage collaborations in the government setup by students and residents? Because I have seen a lot of talented residents and students here who have a lot of ideas who want to collaborate, but because of the red tapes of these government institutes, they are unable to do so.
So what's your name, dear?
Dr. Shubhankar Datta. I'm a junior resident in radiology.
Radiology. Yes, dear. Your name and then tell us what your experience was. Without the mic, with the mic, you are equally audible, so you might as well shout slightly.
I think I am audible now.
Yeah, now.
Okay. I am Dr. Dikshit. I am a PG resident, Community Health Administration at National Institute of Health and Family Welfare. So I am currently in my final year. And in my second year, actually, I stumbled upon one idea and being very passionate about the intersection of healthcare and IT. So I came across this idea and I think I thought that it could create a societal impact as what we are talking about here. And during that time, I researched on whether I am allowed to actually have a startup and whether I am allowed to open a company while being on roles on my current role. So I came across the ICMR DHR policy on that. And in that, it's mentioned that the medical doctor associated with any medical institution cannot be in executive role. He can be in non-executive role. So that was, you can say, first barrier and very big barrier, because I cannot go against my degree to open a startup, and being in a non-executive role, it puts me in a position where I won't be able to take decisions on my own. I would be always at a backseat, and maybe people who are not even in the center of that whole idea which started this process would take the front seat and would guide me throughout the process. So I think this was the biggest barrier, and at some point I thought that I should finish up my course and then I should pursue.
Right. So Dr. Dikshit, I think a part of what you said also illustrates our medical complex. We don't say I got an idea. We say I stumbled upon an idea. We somehow are somewhat shy in saying that we thought up of an idea. So I think what you said is absolutely right. So we'll see what we can do. People at the back, there are seats in front. Please come and sit in front. There's no problem. Yes, ma'am. There are lots of seats in front. Madam, you can speak from there. That's why we gave you the mic.
To prove a point, sir.
Sure.
Yeah. So we had this, thank you. We had this corporate social responsibility being introduced, and we had been offered projects, and funding from a company in Bangalore to see that whatever research we do, if that can be translated, like, impaired glucose tolerance, how many of them will be converted to diabetes or not, just by making a cognitive attention by eye tracking paradigm. And we were offered a lot of funding for that. But then in the institute, the international collaboration, a very euphemistic term just for a talk between Delhi AIIMS and the Bangalore company, it just got lost. And then the powers that be shifted in the Bangalore company. I waited 2 years. So then the other people came in the management.
And then powers to be here can shift and things can keep happening that way, I suppose.
So, I mean,
I
what
agree.
I'm saying is that in
There are
spite of
challenges.
everything, the first tranche of money was also to be there. And for something like they just wanted to put a board where we are working that our name should be displayed. And the thing was, ki CSR is a donation. So you cannot ask even for a board. So
No, but
that
even
is-
in any Indian small town, if you go to a dharmshala, every bench says this has been placed in the memory of parents so,
Yeah,
so and
yeah.
so.
So
So even
that-
donations come with that much of the
So
name, I suppose.
I am a truthful person. I'm telling you right here, the
That's-
narrative that
Now
that
let's
is
hear
was the
from
barrier.
a successful experience. Dr. Gokhale. So can you tell us truthfully what are the challenges you faced? I'm sure even being in your position, you face challenges. And if you have any advice for those young men there. And women.
Men and women. So, no, I think having heard some of the discussions that I've heard, I think what is very important and critical is to have a program on entrepreneurship, actually. You need to have a structured program on entrepreneurship because there are very small aspects of things. For example, whether you should be, as he raised the point of non-executive director, executive directors, the liabilities that come with the non-executive director, executive directors, actually, because they're all very different. And when you run a company, it's not about innovation only. It's about how well you run a business model, actually. And I again re-emphasize the fact that until and unless we actually understand that making money is not a bad thing in life, which is what I was just talking to Balram actually, and we have this common thing. First in India, we think, isne to paisa bana liya karke. Right? That's the most amazing part of our life. We first think that way, actually. So anybody who is going successful or making money is not ideally is an ideal Gandhian person or whatever maybe we called to look at it, actually. So there are a lot of nitty-gritties that one has to understand when you make a company. It's about how to raise capital. I always tell, I've been told by one of the the VC fellow, he said, what is it about making a company? It's about putting your hand in somebody else's pocket, taking out money from his pocket, putting it in your pocket, and still he is happy with you, actually. And that's a very different model that you can do this. So therefore, it's very important that it's not just ideas that sell, but it's ideas that have financial success stories, actually, and how you can spin it around that such that you can at least, create dreams that are very, very successful. But it requires understanding details. And I again tell, it's very important to have a systematic coursework. If one wants to do an entrepreneurship, it's non-trivial problem. Believe me.
I agree. But the problem you talked about, entrepreneurship being putting your hand into somebody's pocket, getting money out and still making that other person happy. Many of us actually do that entrepreneurship, or people who pass out of the portals of this institution. They set up clinics. They do exactly what you talked about, except that they don't develop products as we are looking at it today.
But that is a part of
I
entrepreneurship
think-
only.
So people do have entrepreneurship. There are people whom I have known who have set up, a person 2 years senior to me, center of site or whatever, center for site, whatever he has. That's entrepreneurship actually, and many others that I know. But we are here talking about slightly different entrepreneurship. So how many startups or companies is the All India Institute faculty a part of? Maybe the Dean Research can tell us, or the ex-Dean Research can tell us.
See, I don't think we are a part of a startup.
Or how
We-
many
we can-
innovations have you been able to give to the companies?
I don't have the number, but we do have in the research section a kind of a corpus of which started off at about 40-50 lakhs, which is a part of that 40% AIMS keeps back. now for so many years and for so, I mean, this is since accounts have been, they were being accounted separate. We started accounting them separately. I think Vineet will know better about the figures if he's around. But otherwise, people have been, I can tell you incidents and of people being able to actually sell their patent share. That has happened. If you ask me how many, I'm not sure. It's not a very frequent phenomenon. That much I can assure. It's a rare phenomenon.
Okay, so, we've heard a lot about, yeah, sorry, please go ahead. Yeah.
About a year back, the AIIMS has got a BIRAC grant under which we have a Center of Medical Innovation and Entrepreneurship set up here. It encourages incubators to come in, and about 9 startups have started within the course of about 1.5 years. So these are being nurtured within AIIMS, and we have a whole sort of an administrative team under the research section looking at this center. So we hope that the ecosystem with this center will will take it forward in the next few years as a model.
So that's where our radiology resident needs to go. The gentleman who was in black shirt and talked about red tape. Yeah. You're aware of it. Okay, good. So at least the center is advertising itself well. Now we heard about making money and money being bad. Why does that happen here with us? Because we train to be doctors. And we had this, whichever version of oath you take, it talks about not bothering about money. And other professionals don't take an oath. We somehow think that, our ethics are somewhat different. We somehow have conflict of interest in many things. Do people on the dais, anyone? Do you think that's a limitation in our getting into this entrepreneurship? Or people in the audience who may think so? First people on the dais, Dr. Deepak, please.
In recent years, there have been very positive development at AIIMS. It's a long-term process. I've gone through 30 years of having an idea. My idea was used by the NASA. I couldn't do anything. The idea is still there, but the recent development here are taking good place. Let's do the micro analysis. I have done innovation. I have a product, a process. Who will do a validation for me? I don't find a person.
Other institutions around, other people?
Why should they take it?
Why not? So that's what we need to, that's what I'm trying to say, that we'll have to...
No, I think that's what the problem. Second, the industry situated very far. It should come to doorstep. By the time we go to the industry, it is already, this team is already lost. That's what why fit it very useful, because we want to fit and we are going to end our NRDC. We still find NRDC, one product is lying in pipeline. The problem is the distance between medical sciences and industry is much, much far. And that's happening.
Maybe it will happen in Jhajjar. If industry is set up in that place, you'll be closer to them.
I think
in Delhi, there is no space
maybe
for
this
industry.
BIRAC innovation has come up. It is bringing industry to us now. I think the first is permission to go to a private. Like if I want to apply to go to a private university, I said no. Private university like Manipal or even Amity, no. Talk about industry? No.
But you are the leaders of the institution, dear.
Now this is a policy. Now this is what the people are sitting over here. Let's make a policy. That
I have lost the director AIIMS here, but the ex-director is there. The deans are all there. You are the policy makers. Who stops you?
Okay, so we'll do that. It's happening now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Shinjini, you wanted to say something. I saw you raise your hand.
To discuss with our younger colleagues here, what are the solutions? I think we've been kind of going on and on about what the problems are. And honestly, I think the solutions are not all that unsurmountable. I mean, I know Alok knows, he's been looking after the equivalent of a bioness that we have at THSTI and at the cluster really. And I mean, this is, so I just want to take a minute to explain what and how the Institute innovation can really, So at THS, at the cluster, at the bioscience cluster, which has Regional Center for Biotechnology and THSTI and funded by BIRAC and with Rajesh's support there, we have what we call the BioNest, and which is exactly what AIIMS is starting now. We went through a lot of teething problems in the beginning, but it creates a platform of what you are saying, that you have an idea, you take that idea, with a collaborator or without a collaborator. And Subrat, we have AIIMS TB, some of the TB group people there as part of startups in those things. So you have a collaborator, you go to them with the idea, you set up a platform for validation. They help you with getting an industry or people help to invest in your enterprise. There is an industry on board through that whole platform, and you take it cannot happen in isolation, and it cannot happen with individuals wanting to. So I think you people have a beautiful setup now, which can be a great platform for the younger people to take it forward. And the policies that DBT has, CSIR has, ICMR has that come out, everything is listed. Who is the IP owner? Who is the inventor? Where do you license? It's all clear. You don't really need to reinvent them.
Yeah, thank you. So, Dr. Shirshendu, we have only a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll take only 2 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. First, you say your piece, then I'll have a question.
Yeah, on the IP issue, I think a lot of people talked about it. It's a challenge. It's absolutely not a challenge.
Yeah.
What IP we should understand, firstly, when you begin to file IP, we need to do a potential commercial valuation of your innovation, which understands the prior art and then whether it is worth patenting, as Sir said. Now, to file a patent, initially it takes only 10,000 rupees. 4,000 is the patent office fee and 6,000 is the attorney fees. We at the BIRAC system have created facility for our funded projects to enable that to file it. You have 12 months to have as a provisional. Within that, we aggressively look for commercial partners. If you have it, extend it to the PCT phase. That takes around 3 lakh rupees, which is again funded. And then you have to have aggressively a commercial partner. If you don't have it within 12 and these 18 months of PCT, you should abandon your patent. It is not worth taking it forward. That is the first thing. But we have facility, as Madam said, we have a BioNest here. We have 75 such BioNest across the country, which is supporting it. We have established through BIRAC NBM facility around seven regional technology transfer offices, which is aggressively talking to all the innovators in all places to help you to connect with your industry and help you to transfer the technology. That is the second thing. Finally, on the industry built up on the research, we have programs where you can jointly support funding application, taking industry into your joint applications, where you are funded for your science and innovation, and industry is also funded for its scale up. I think we should all take benefit of all these things and work together. But ultimately, we have to build a team. It is not one thing, 360-degree team we need to have in place to take innovation to entrepreneurship. Thank you.
So, Dr. Shirshendu, we heard that a lot of innovation happens in these 1 kilometer radius, but we also heard that Jugaad is everywhere in the country. So I'm sure, and you talked about there being centers elsewhere. So how many of those are in medical institutions outside Delhi, or in less endowed institutions within Delhi, for that matter?
What we look at as a cluster-based innovation model. It is not that it is housed within this system. For example, we have one in, say, the Regional Technology Transfer Office, IIT Delhi, and this is called the FIT, and its area is all around Delhi and some part of the northern region. So they need to go around and sit with the innovators there, understand their innovation, help them and handhold them to filing the IP. Similarly, we have, say, in west side in Pune. So they cover a belt there, so they are talking to all the medical schools, the engineering schools there, bringing in the collaborations together, help them to raise funding. So that is the enabling mechanism is there to build all, and I think we encourage all of them to really go out, do a strong outreach, connect with them to take it forward.
From the audience, yes, the gentleman there and then the person at the back behind him. Anybody else in the audience has any questions? Okay, we'll come to you. Anyone else? Okay, 4. Okay.
Sir, I'm Ashish
Otherwise,
Suri.
they'll throw us out after that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm Ashish Suri. I'm a neurosurgery professor here. I'm also the adjunct professor in IIT Delhi last 14 years. The couple of issues I would like to bring about. Number one, We have to understand that Indian industry is a service industry. It is not a manufacturing industry. Maximum, it is a service provider software industry. It is not a manufacturing industry. The change is coming, but I think it will take around another 10 to 20 years to become like Taiwan or like China or like places in which manufacturing is an important component. And we cannot do, the present medical industry is 90% imported. Even in this hospital, and even in my super specialties in neurosurgery, 99% imported. We are relying on completely on US, Germany, and Japan. To completely replace that by an Indian manufacturing is creating a chaos that we are already witnessing. The GEM and the bypassing of the permissions for the global tenders, we are witnessing it every day. That is a very big challenge that we have. Medical production is not the same as industrial production for a bridge or a building or maybe a sanitary products or anything else. Second, we have to understand the difference between innovations and inventions. I think Dr. Bhargava beautifully brought it out. Innovations do not require patents. They require rapid production and hitting the market and before it changes. Inventions require patents for protection. And I think that is where institutions like AIIMS, IITs, and many others have to protect the inventors. That is important because inventions take a long time. They take probably a series of 2 or 3 PhDs in series. Third thing we have to understand, and that is for the younger people who think that, yes, you can study and you can become professor, and then you can also have a company. We have to understand the difference between academics and entrepreneurship. 9 out of 10 startups fail. Please, this is the truth. The world over. No one has mentioned it till the last 1 hour. Out of that which one succeeds, 9 out of 10 success do not see the light of 5 years. That is also the truth world over. And this includes Netflix and it includes many other software programs as well. And plus, commercialization isn't simple. It takes a lot of high risk. I am here, I'm a professor. I'm a walking, talking company and many of the professors here are. But we took the challenge of remaining here, do academics, write papers, do some patents. But yes, we could have been doing the same thing like you mentioned. But running a company is a big risk. You can only succeed in running a company if your tail is on fire, sir. If you lose everything and you have to make it succeed. That's the only way you can run a company. You cannot be in 2 boats and sail together. I'm very sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Ashish. I think that's a very important perspective. But then we can set our tails on fire. That's not a problem. When you have, for me, when there is a patient having a GI bleed, my tail is on fire when I'm doing an endoscopy, right? That's true for you in neurosurgery all the time. So that's doable. Yes, dear.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chaitanya. I am we started last year with something called the Entrepreneurship Development Club. That is basically our undergraduate initiative to promote entrepreneurship amongst ourselves since there is no formal program and that's a need like sir mentioned. And I wanted to share 1 or 2 experiences regarding it. The first was regarding the public perception. So we tried to inculcate financial literacy into undergraduates and we wanted to do something related to stock education and having some leagues related to that. So one comment that we got was that this will look bad on AIIMS because it will seem like doctors want to start earning money. AIIMS के डॉक्टरों को पैसा कमाना है and they're no more concerned about their education. That was a major concern in terms of public perception and how we fear that might happen.
But when you have pulse, nobody thinks that what people think about, right? Isn't it? I hear pulse has changed a lot because my students come with a lot of requests that they want to do things which are done at pulse. And when we say that, those don't look nice on doctors. But that's okay.
Fine, no comments. The second thing I wanted to add was that if you look, 9 undergraduate posters were presented in the research day. So, and a part of that is credits to the research section for starting the UG mentorship program where a 2 lakh rupee research grant is given for research projects. In a similar manner, like Dr. Subrata mentioned that there's a 70-30 distribution between inventor and AIIMS for any patents that come out of here. And the policy was also very retrogressive till 2017, where it explicitly stated that any invention done at AIIMS with or without the support of AIIMS is the sole intellectual property of AIIMS. So, but there was a revenue sharing agreement of 30-70. So I feel whatever 30% that AIIMS is getting, it should reinvest into entrepreneurship initiatives. And it can develop a parallel program similar to the UG mentorship program, where it can be a UG entrepreneurship program or even a residence entrepreneurship program. To that extent.
Dr. Subrata Sinha.
this 40-60 has been around for a long time, actually, not started in 70. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. There was a gentleman here, and then we have somebody at the back, and then I think they'll drive us out if we don't stop anyway. So that will be okay.
Yeah, good evening, sir. It's a very interesting session. I am Dr. Rama Chaudhry from...
Thank you.
I'm an additional professor in cardiac anesthesia department here in AIIMS. My question pertains to our our hands are tied because we have non-practicing allowance at one end. On the other hand, there is a talk of moonlighting these days, that being a 24-hour employee of this institution or any institution, and you are like catering your services to others. So in this light, how this like panel discussion explains or assuage our
Anyone wants to answer this question? Moonlighting in the IT industry versus this? You want to try say something, Dr. Gokhale, on this?
I think a good question, but moonlighting is also not fraught with less debate even in the IT industry. It's facing a lot of flack even in the IT industry. And therefore, the next stage will be whether it will be considered with as a taboo in our industry as well, if you want to call this as an industry.
See, moonlighting, they are doing the same kind of work that they are doing for their primary employer. And the question is there a conflict of interest in that? And to me, they don't even get an NPA. You, for not doing moonlighting, you get NPA. I think the issue is of doing things other than what is your primary job that you are paid for. If you are, so we are we'll have to try and distinguish between that. And that's my question, what the student there said. If you develop something with or without the help of the institution where you are, if I can make a better cycle stand, which holds better, if I work here, does that mean that, that innovation also, the right belongs to the institute? So we'll have to try and distinguish between, how much related it is to my work. And that's what I think that we'll have to keep in mind. There was somebody at the back who raised hand.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, sure.
Conflict? So, I wanted to bring this point that you raised a couple of times regarding conflict of interest. This is always going to happen when you're going to have an entrepreneurship. For example, Dr. Suri is not going to do entrepreneurship in non-neurology area because that's an area that you know. So I think we should not call that conflict of interest. We have to find mechanisms to mitigate conflict of interest actually. And in fact, find ways that it's a win-win for all of them. That's one of the major factors that we are all not progressing in our entrepreneurship programs and policies, because constantly we talk about conflict of interest. Sorry, Baba, that's an area I know. So people are going to fund me only in the area in which you know well actually, right? And so that's the critical part. The second I would request, looks like, because looks like medical sciences has coming up later on in this game. I think you've missed Startup 1.0. Believe me, it's not been fabulous in India in terms of making value chain and money. I think AIIMS should adopt Startup 2.0 policy, which is far better and interesting. And I can help you out drafting some of the points which I have in my mind actually, which is well ahead of itself.
So why I was raising this conflict of interest was exactly to hear what you said now. That's why I was raising that issue again and again, that conflicts of interest are everywhere, but they can be managed and the institutions will have to find mechanisms to manage. The lady there who wanted to say something, somebody there?
So I have a question.
Yeah, you have a mic. Okay.
So I am actually faculty in radiology and I work a lot in artificial intelligence. So my question really is, I'm not going to go as far as entrepreneurship, but it's a little bit behind that. So how can we, since there are so many policymakers here, make it easier for us to just collaborate with industry? So for example, if I was to collaborate with a Google or an HP or NVIDIA, there is a lot of difficulty in terms of, whether I'm allowed to share data with them, how do I go about it? Even in terms of grants, if I was to write a grant with an IIT, I'm likely to get it. But if I was to write with a Google, I'll probably not get it as far as most grant agencies are concerned. So how can we be helped out over there? Because most of the talent actually is in industry when it comes to collaborators, at least as far as AI is concerned. All the NLP, all the DL guys are sitting in industry, are sitting in Google or in Facebook. So how do we sort of come around?
So you want to take this, Dr. Mukherjee? I actually wanted to go to international collaborations, but it's come up there. Yeah.
Little bit answered this question.
Your mic is not working.
We in BIRAC actually encourage industry collaboration, and especially clinician with the industry collaboration. Literally is a very very encouraged proposition. So there are programs, there are initiatives where you can literally talk to the industry, jointly apply. Some of the milestones you do, some of the milestones industry do, and it's a joint collaborative proposal. And that is always encouraged when we have schemes and proposals coming out on a regular basis which supports this, and especially in artificial intelligence and robotics and everything, it's much, much encouraged.
One thing that I have learned in life. Okay, please go ahead.
See, listen, we are doing clinical trials. We are doing industry-funded clinical trials. Now, if you put in the same model, that model is there. So for you to collaborate or work using company money according to our rules is possible. Now comes the next issue is how, with clinical trials you're validating and all. Then comes the next issue of how you share equity, how you share profits. That is the gray area. But if for pure academic interest with IP written out, it is already happening.
So, but not as far as a clinical trial, maybe to co-develop something like,
So I'm saying the same model can be used for co-development in which perhaps I feel it is still possible to get a share of IP. The point is whether you will be holding equity in the company, that may not be. Share of IP, perhaps.
So I'm aware of your work. So we have had some people wanting to work with Google. And I can share with you what happened in the committee. There were people, including some comments from me, saying that when you share data with them, we all know what Google is. You search for a ticket from here to Bangalore and next 20 days you get, right? So that is what the issue was. And they said, no, we are going to have something on that device. They will not be able to find who the person is. Identifying data won't be there. And the questions was that they know which house you are living in once you have. So I think, but finally, I think we were able to, in a small group, able to resolve these problems. And the resolution was, Google anyway knows where you are, right? It's not going to be participating in this study. The problem was the investigator was intentionally trying to put in things to show as if data were not going to go to Google. And we had to say, why don't you say it up front that they would have this data, but they have this anyway, and why we do this? So I'm just trying to give you an alternative way. So it does happen in a committee, but somebody had to break the ice by saying, do you think without that Google doesn't know your data? So that was it. So one thing I've learned in life, in any session, a woman has to have the last word. And Shinjini has raised her hand, so I have to allow her to do that.
Okay.
Shinjini and I go a long way. I reminded her yesterday night that we go back to 1984 when we were junior residents together in C2 ward. So go ahead. From that time, she gets precedence.
Woman in our BioNest, 40% are women founders. So that's for the women. Okay, I just had one question for Dr. Suri. When you said that, it's difficult, and I don't want to we shouldn't leave on a negative note here for the younger people. I know it's very difficult. It's not easy. And now not being an institute and being in another institute, I can't tell you how much we need medical people out there for giving ideas, for collaborating on these, even if it's not a company, collaborating on that innovation. There's a lot of industry there, a lot of other domains, but we really need medical people to provide those ideas. And I think that is something one feels hugely, that vacuum there. So, yeah.
Yes. Just to add to what Shinjini is saying, the need for medical people, for taking the innovations, for getting the ideas. If you look at the inventions that have happened in the world, medical devices and medical diagnostics, 50% have been led by doctors and 50% have been led by engineers. Whether it's CT scan or MRI or any of these inventions, 50% have been led by doctors. So there is great hope, and wish all the best.
So with that, let me first thank my panelists, Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, Dr. Balram Bhargava, Dr. Chitra Sarkar, Dr. Shirshendu Mukherjee, Dr. Shinjini Bhatnagar, and Dr. Srinivas. I suppose he got a call somewhere and he had to leave in between. Thanks a lot. You've all been wonderful. And the same is true for those from the audience who made interventions and gave us their experiences. And finally, I would like to thank Dr. Rama Chaudhry, the director of the institute, and Vineet for asking me to be here. You put me in a tight spot. I really was flustered when on Sunday evening I was told that I need to step into this role. But I think my panelists and the audience made the job easier. Of course, having a 44-year association, it's very difficult to say no to something from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, but I enjoyed it. Thank you.
That was really interesting and engaging. हम अपने मॉडरेटर्स का और पैनलिस्ट का उनके इतने उत्साहवर्धक, ज्ञानवर्धक और प्रेरणादायक संवाद सत्र के लिए हृदय की सीमाओं से आभार और अभिनंदन प्रकट करते हैं.
So thank you all for this fantastic, insightful and lively panel discussion. I request Professor Vaishali Suri to please felicitate the distinguished guests.
Dr. Vineet Ahuja, he is not listening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. So now I hand over the stage to my colleague, Dr. Sunita and Dr. Soumitra for the award distribution ceremony.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. Good evening, everyone. So now we have arrived to the part of the Research Day celebrations, the part which is most eagerly waited for, not only by the students, but also by their mentors. I now request all the deans, Dean Academic, Dr. Subrata Sinha, sir, Dean Research, Ma'am Dr. Rama Chaudhry, and Dean Examination, Dr. K.K. Deepak.
I also request Professor Guleria to please be on the dais to encourage our students.
Thank you, ma'am.
I thought I will take this time to share something. We had a wonderful panel discussion. And for the younger people, I really want to share one book, which is on Jennifer Doudna, the Nobel laureate. And the book is The Code Breaker. And this is written by Walter Isaacson. I recommend all of you to read it. This is a real true story of success story, that how just a simple chemist can turn her dream into an entrepreneurship, and she was the one who got the Nobel Prize. The key to that was actually the teamwork and to dream big, to have big dreams in your life. I'm sure you can make it happen. Many of you may turn out to be Nobel laureate tomorrow. So please read this book. This I really recommend all of you.
Good evening, everyone. I know it's been a very long day, but it has been definitely worth the wait. So we have different categories of awards to be presented. So by the time we start, let me just take you through the different categories of awards that would be provided today. So we have MBBS, Nursing, MSc, Junior Residents, Senior Residents, PhD students, Project Fellows, STG, that is the Sustainability Development Group, Goals, the Innovative Device, and last but not the least, the Selfie Award.
I just want to say that we had a very overwhelming response as far as the posters were concerned. We did select 3 oral presentations which were held today. And all the posters, I think, are going to be displayed for another 3-4 days, so that those who could not see can go and have a look. And even though the award is already given today, but still you have a chance if you want to really take a selfie with whatever poster you like the most. And it was a big challenge for the judges to really select the best one. I can say for sure that each poster, each work which you have displayed was really wonderful. And I don't know who will get the prize. I still don't know the result of today's evaluation. But I can say one thing, all of you are winner. So all the posters, people, I really want to commend your efforts, the teamwork, and every poster, every presentation, every abstract was really, really wonderful. At a very short notice, because we did not give you much time, especially to SDG posters. But I must say that it was a commendable job, and already director has told us to keep this exhibition for some more days. So please keep visiting those who could not, come and see this. And it is really encouraging to all of them, those who have spent so much of time in doing that research. A word of encouragement, it really which makes that person feel, the whole thing has been truly fruitful. So that way, I really want all of you to visit if you have not already visited. And with that, I again, once again, also want to thank my team, the research team. Whatever is to be said at the end, I will say in the beginning, just to save the time, that the whole, everyone in the research team and in the research section has worked very, very hard. And I think from last 3-4 days, many of them were spending their evenings and they went late. So that is really commendable. And thanks to each and every one of you. So big clap for them. So sir is here already. Director sir is here.
So in the MBBS oral presentations category, the second prize goes to Mr. Ishan Gupta. The first prize goes to Ms. Shivani Srivastava. For the MBBS poster category, the third prize goes to For the MBBS posters, the third prize goes to Mr. Arunangshu. The second prize goes to Ms. Tamogna Ghosh. And the first prize goes to Mr. Madhav Mohata. We also have the Critics Awards for the posters. The third prize goes to Mr. Bhavik Bansal. The second prize goes to Ms. Vaishnavi Agnihotri. And the first prize goes to Ms. Tamogna Ghosh. Next, we move on to the nursing category. We begin with the Judges Award for the best posters. The third prize goes to Ms. Vasundhara. The second prize goes to Ms. Monica Tanwar. And the first prize goes to Ms. Ruby. In the Nursing Critics Award, the third prize goes to Miss Monica Tanwar. The second prize goes to Mr. Bibin Lal. And the first prize goes to Miss Ruby. We now move on to the MSc category. For the oral presentation, the first prize goes to Miss Anjali Gaur. For the MSc Judges Awards for the posters, there are 2 commendation prizes. The first commendation prize goes to Miss Nandana Devi. The second commendation prize goes to Miss Sweetie Rani. For the third position, there is a tie. Miss Shivi Khurana and Miss Millie Kaur. The second prize goes to Miss Bhanupriya Tanwar. And the first prize goes to Mr. Yogesh Sharma. Moving on to the MSc Poster Awards under the Critics category. The third prize goes to Miss Ananya Kar. The second prize goes to Miss Sneha Verma. And the first prize goes to Miss Preeti Singh. The next award for the oral category under MSc, Miss Shivani Srivastava, first prize. The next category is the junior resident. The oral presentations, the third prize goes to Mr. Shravan K. Raut. The second prize goes to Miss Anjusha Ranjit. And the first prize goes to Mr. Yellam Raju Saikostub. MSc oral paper, first prize, Miss Shivani Srivastava. For the junior residents, the poster category, there are 3 commendation prizes. Dr. Naveen K.S., Dr. Vivek Ghosh, and Dr. Ayush Aggarwal. The third prize goes to Dr. Suraj Verma. Not that. The second prize goes to Dr. Amtesh Khare. And the first prize goes to Dr. Ajit Anthony. The Critics Awards for the poster presentation, JR category. Third prize goes to Dr. Sumna VM. The second prize goes to Dr. Naveen KS. And the first prize goes to Dr. Aishi Pal. Dr. Aishi Pal. So the next category, we move on to the senior residents. We begin with the oral category. The third prize goes to Dr. Nidhi Gupta. The second prize goes to Dr. Surabhi Jain. And the first prize goes to Dr. Jaya Biswas. Dr. Jaya Biswas. Now we move on to the Judges Awards for the poster category for the senior residents. There are two commendation prizes, Dr. Manisha Kalung and Dr. Nikhil Mehta. The third prize goes to Dr. Rijuta. The second prize goes to Dr. Salman Khan. The first prize goes to Dr. Mohak Narang. We now move to the next category, that is the Critics Award for the senior residents. The third prize goes to Dr. Nikhil Mehta. The second prize goes to Dr. Roktim Swarnakar. And the first prize goes to Dr. Saranya B. Gomati. Yeah. We now move on to our next category, the PhD. Under the oral category, there is a tie for the second position. Miss Apurva Challa and Miss K.M. Renu both get the second prize. And the first prize goes to Miss Srishti Raman. Moving on to the Judges Awards for the PhD poster category, there are 3 commendation prizes. Miss Srishti Raman. So the poster awards under the PhD category, there are 3 commendation prizes. Miss Mahaiwan Shadang, Miss Jyotsna Singh, and Miss Christine Wilson. The third prize goes to Miss Leena Sapra. The second prize goes to Miss Shivani. And the first prize goes to Mr. Amit Kumar Yadav. Biophysics. Amit Kumar Yadav, Biophysics. Moving on to the Critics Awards for the posters, the third prize goes to Mr. Brijesh Kumar. The second prize goes to Miss Purva Bhargava. And the first prize goes to Miss Shweta Sharma. Next, we move to the other category, that is the project fellows. Again, we've got 2 commendation prizes for the posters. Miss Shruti Mahapatra and Dr. Vivek Dikshit. The third prize goes to Dr. Kriti Kaushik. The second prize goes to Miss Ruchi. And the first prize goes to Dr. Soumya Dash. Moving on to the Critics Awards for the best posters. The third prize goes to Miss Alia Mufti. The second prize goes to Miss Mamta Puraswani. And the first prize goes to Miss Prachi Tiwari. The next award category is the SDG Judges Poster Awards. The third prize goes to Miss Srishti Raman. Second prize goes to Mr. Vinay Raj EV. And the first prize goes to Miss Apurva Challa. Next, we move on to the SDG Awards for under the Critics category. There are three second prizes. Mr. Masroor Anwar, Miss Indrani Mukherjee, and Dr. Leena Sapra. The first prize goes to Ms. Sonakshi Gupta. We now move on to the Innovative Devices Award. The third prize goes to For the Innovative Devices Award, the third prize goes to Dr. Ashish Suri. The second prize goes to Dr. Nihar Ranjan Dash. And the first prize goes to Dr. Vikram Saini. We've now come to the last award, but that's not the least, the Selfie Award. And the Selfie Award goes to Professor Urvashi Singh from the Department of Microbiology for her poster on the SDG. So with this, we come to the end of the awards and presentations. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for doing the honors. I now request Dr. Sunita to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. The crowd looks very excited, right? So now I'll just say thank you all, and thank you all. Thank you everyone who has contributed to this great festival. I call it as a festival, not a research day. As we head into Diwali, it's just a festival now. So I would, ma'am, would you please say
I
a few
just want
words?
to say one thing, that please have a photograph of all the winners before you leave. And thank you everyone. As I said earlier, all of you are winners. So please don't feel bad. The awards are meant actually for everyone and just representatives are getting it. That's all.
So here are some pictures for you if you want to revisit your last 1.5 days. Our sincere thanks to all our distinguished guests, speakers and chairpersons who spared their time to be with us today. We earnestly thank the director, Dr. Srinivas, especially for the support to our research and grants. Thank you, Dean ma'am. Thank you for your valuable inputs, without which we could not have organized this meeting at all. We thank Dr. Ahuja, who has been the backbone of this Research Day celebration. We thank all the participants who presented their research here on this platform. Every single contribution from you in the form of your research findings, experiences, and deliberations are vital to the mission of this institute. Congratulations again, and thank you very much. My vote of thanks will not be complete until I say something about the 4 facilities, the CMET, CMI, the CRU, and the CCRF, who have worked endlessly, tirelessly over the last few weeks. So thanks a lot for making this event a huge success. Special thanks to Dr. Ahuja. Sir, would you like to say a few words? Sir, please. I think everybody wants to hear from you, sir. Okay.
So I just want to once again thank Dr. Vineet Ahuja. He is like behind the scene. He has been doing everything, and the whole success goes to him. Please, big hand to Dr. Vineet Ahuja. Thanks to all the team members here. I think we should have a picture with all of you. Come quickly. Come.